Okay, this is part 68 of Nos4a2, the St. Nicholas Parkway. Wayne slept for a long time, an endless time of quiet and peace, and when he opened his eyes, he knew that everything was all right. Nos4a2 sped through the dark, a torpedo churning through the fathomless depths. They were rising through low hills, the wraith hugging the curves as if it were on rails. Wayne was rising toward something wonderful and fine. Snow fell in gentle goose-feather flakes. The wipers went swoop, swoop, striking them down. They passed a lone street lamp in the night, a 12-foot candy cane topped with a gumdrop, casting a cherry light, turning those falling flakes to feathers of flame. The wraith swept along a high curve that afforded a view of the vast tableland below, silver and smooth and flat, and at the far end of it, the mountains. Wayne had never seen mountains like them. They made the Rockies look like homely foothills. The smallest of them had the proportions of Everest. They wore a great range of stone teeth, a crooked row of fangs, sharp enough, large enough to devour the sky. Rocks 40,000 feet high pierced the night, held up the darkness, pushed into the stars. Above it all drifted a silvery scathed blade of moon. Wayne looked up at it and away, and then looked again. The moon had a hooked nose, a thoughtfully frowning mouth, and a single eye closed in sleep. When it exhaled, a wind rippled across the plains, and silvery beds of cloud raced through the night. Wayne almost clapped his hands in delight to look upon it. It was impossible, though, to look away from the mountains for long. The pitiless cyclopean peaks drew Wayne's gaze as a magnet will draw iron shavings. For there, in a notch 2/3 of the way up the largest of the mountains, was a bright jewel pinned to the side of the rock face. It shone brighter than the moon, brighter than any star. It burned in the night like a torch. Christmasland. "You should roll down the window and try to grab one of those sugar flakes," advised Mr. Mannix from the front seat. For a moment, Wayne had forgotten who was driving the car. He had stopped worrying about it. It wasn't important. Getting there was the thing. He felt a throb of eagerness to be there already, rolling in between the candy cane gates. "Sugar flake? Don't you mean snowflake?" "If I meant snowflake, I would have said snowflake. Those are flakes of pure cane sugar, and if we were in a plane, we'd be shredding cotton candy clouds. Go on, roll down a window, catch one, and see if I'm a liar." "Won't it be cold?" Wayne asked. Mr. Mannix looked at him in the rearview mirror, the laugh lines crinkling at the corners of his eyes. He wasn't scary anymore. He was young, and if he was not handsome, he at least looked spiffy in his black leather gloves and black overcoat. His hair was black now, too, slicked back under his leather-brimmed cap to show the high, bare expanse of his forehead. The gas-mask man was asleep next to him, a sweet smile on his fat, bristly face. He wore a white marine uniform with a breastful of gold medals upon it. A second glance, though, showed that these medals were in fact chocolate coins in gold foil wrap. He had 9 of them. Wayne understood now that getting to go to Christmasland was better than going to Hogwarts Academy or Willy Wonka's Chocolate Factory, or the Cloud City in Star Wars, or Rivendell in Lord of the Rings. Not one child in a million was allowed into Christmasland, only kids who truly needed. It was impossible to be unhappy there, in that place where every morning was Christmas morning and every evening was Christmas Eve, where tears were against the law and children flew like angels, or floated. Wayne was unclear on the difference. He knew something else. His mother hated Mr. Mannix because he wouldn't take her to Christmasland. And if she couldn't go, she didn't want Wayne to go either. The reason his mother drank so much was because getting smashed was the closest a person could ever get to feeling the way you felt when you were in Christmasland, even though a bottle of gin was as different from Christmasland as a dog biscuit was from filet mignon. His mother had always known that someday Wayne would get to go to Christmasland. That was why she couldn't stand to be around him. That was why she ran away from him for all those years. He didn't want to think about it. He would call her as soon as he got to Christmasland. He would tell her he loved her and that everything was all right. He would call her every day if he had to. It was true she sometimes hated him, that she hated being a mother, but he was determined to love her anyway, to share his happiness with her. "Cold?" Mr. Mannix cried, snapping Wayne's thoughts back to the here and now. You worry like my Aunt Matilda. Go on, roll the window down. Besides, I know you, Bruce Wayne camaraderie. You are thinking serious thoughts, aren't you? You are a serious little fellow. We need to cure you of that, and we will. Dr. Mannix prescribes a mug of peppermint cocoa and a ride on the Arctic Express with the other kids. If you are still feeling in a glum mood after that, then there is no hope for you. Come on and roll down the window. Let the night air in to blow away the gloomies. Don't be an old lady. It is like I am driving somebody's grandmother instead of a little boy. Wayne turned to roll down the window, and when he did, he got a nasty surprise. His grandmother Linda sat next to him. He had not seen her for months. It was hard to visit with relatives when they were dead. She was still dead now. She sat in a hospital johnny, untied so he could see her skeletal bare back when she leaned forward. She was sitting on the gold beige leather seats with her bare ass. Her legs were scrawny and terrible, very white in the darkness, crawling with old black varicose veins. Her eyes were hidden behind a pair of shiny silver, newly minted $50. Wayne opened his mouth to scream, but Grandma Lindy lifted her finger to her lips. Shh. Down it slow, you reverse if in think you if. Oh my god, okay. Okay, it's backwards speak, but I got this. Down it's slow can you, reverse and think you if. Wayne truth the from away you driving he's, she warned gravely. Mannix cocked his head as if listening for a noise he didn't like under the hood. Linda had spoken clearly enough for Mannix to hear her, but he didn't look all the way around, and his expression suggested he thought he had heard something but wasn't sure. The sight of her was bad enough, but the nonsense she spoke, nonsense that hovered maddeningly on the edge of meaning, sent a shock of fright through Wayne. The coins over her eyes flashed. Go away, he whispered. Himself for youth your keep, and behind soul your leave, he'll snap you until band rubber, a like out you stretch, hill. Soul own your from away you drive, hill. Grammy Lindy explained, pressing a cold finger into his breastbone every now and then for emphasis. He made a thin whining sound in the back of his throat, recoiling from her touch. At the same time, he found himself struggling to make sense out of her gravelly recited gibberish. He'll snap you. He got that. Band rubber? No, that had to be rubber band. There it was. She was saying things backward, and on some level Wayne understood that this was why Mr. Mannix could not quite hear her in the front seat. He could not hear her because he was going forward and she was running in reverse. He tried to remember what else she had said, to see if he could untangle her dead woman's syntax, but it was already fading away from him. Mr. Mannix said, Roll down the window, little boy. Do it. His voice suddenly hard, not as friendly as it had been before. I want you to grab some of that sweetness for yourself. Hurry now, we are almost to a tunnel. But Wayne couldn't roll down the window. To do so would have required him to reach past Lindy, and he was afraid. He was as afraid of her as he had ever been of Mannix. He wanted to cover his eyes so he wouldn't have to see her. He took short little gasping breaths, a runner on the last lap, and his exhalations smoked, as if it were cold in the back of the car, although it didn't feel cold. He peered into the front seat for help, but Mr. Mannix had changed. He was missing his left ear. It was tatters of flesh, little crimson strings swinging against his cheek. His hat was missing, and the head it had covered was now bald and lumpy and spotted, with just a few silver threads combed across it. A great flap of loose red skin hung from his brow. His eyes were gone, and where they had been were buzzing red holes, not bloody sockets, but craters containing live coals. Beside him, the gas-masked man slept on in his crisp uniform, smiling like a man with a full belly and warm feet. Through the windshield, Wayne could see they were approaching a tunnel bored into a wall of rock, a black pipe leading into the side of the hill. "Who is back there with you?" Mannix asked, his voice humming and terrible. It was not the voice of a man. It was the voice of 1,000 flies droning in unison. Wayne looked around for Lindy, but she was gone, had left him. The tunnel swallowed the wraith. In the darkness, there were only those red holes where Mannix's eyes belonged, staring back at him. "I don't want to go to Christmasland," Wayne said. "Everyone wants to go to Christmasland." said the thing in the front seat that used to be a man but was not anymore, and maybe had not been for 100 years. They were fast approaching a bright circle of sunlight at the end of the tunnel. It had been night when they entered the hole in the mountain, but they were rushing toward a summery glare, and even when they were still 100 feet away, the brightness hurt Wayne's eyes. He put his hands over his face, moaning in distress. The light burned through his fingers, growing ever more intense until it shone right through his hands, and he could see the black sticks of his own bones buried in softly glowing tissue. He felt that at any moment all that sunlight might cause him to ignite. "I don't like it! I don't like it!" he shouted. The car jolted and banked over pitted road with enough force to dislodge his hands from his face. He blinked into morning sunlight. Bing Partridge, the gas mask man, sat up and turned in his seat to look back at Wayne. His uniform was gone, and he wore the same stained track suit he had been dressed in the day before. "No," he said, digging a finger in his ear. "I'm not much of a morning person either."